Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily. Today is Friday, October 4th, 2024. On today's episode of the show, we're going to be talking about Greg Jardin's new movie, It's What's Inside, and we will also present an interview with Greg Jardin. My name is Ben Pearson. I'm an editor at slashfilm.com, and I'm joined on today's episode by Slash Film staff writers Ryan Scott.
Hey, everyone. How's it going?
And Bill Bria.
I don't know what's going on, but I'm Ryan Scott. Can somebody help me, please?
I see what you did there, Bill. Okay, so before we get started today, guys, I want to do a short monologue to explain myself to our listeners. So you may notice that today is Friday, and there's a splashy new release in theaters, and that movie is Joker, Folie à Deux. Normally, I would have devoted this entire episode to talking about that film. I have chosen not to do that for a couple of reasons. First of all, I was not a big fan of the first movie, and I find myself increasingly annoyed by the discourse around both of these films, including statements made by director Todd Phillips. Secondly, most of the people I could talk to about that movie on an episode of this podcast have seen it and did not like it. And they seem so dejected by it, in fact, that I could pretty much not imagine a scenario in which we were able to have a conversation about the movie that felt fun or interesting instead of dull and defeated. So I decided that my time on this earth is too short to spend watching movies that I'm pretty sure I'm not going to like unless I literally have to for work. And in this case, I wasn't actually being forced by anybody to watch it. So I decided to skip it. So I don't know, at least for now. Maybe I'll watch it one day. But anyway, that's why we're not devoting a whole episode to it. With all of that said, Bill, I think you actually did see the movie, and you're one of the few people who did not have that dejected reaction that I spoke about earlier. So quickly, tell me what you thought about Joker Folie à Deux.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is a movie that I'm falling on my sword currently about putting it in the positive light. But it's something that, for me, it is a lot of subversions. And look, I am not a defender of Todd Phillips as an auteur or, even as an idiot savant or anything of that nature. I think that his films are okay to middling. I haven't seen all of them, but the ones I've seen, and I think that in the case of the Joker movies that he's made, both the first and this one, he has, you know, what's that quote? I don't know. I think it's attributed to a million different people over the centuries, but the quote about like great artists steal, that I think. And Todd Phillips is a consummate stealer. He really has stolen from a lot of good sources. So make a lot of what works for me in both of these movies, obviously the Scorsese stuff in the first Joker, and in this one, stuff like People versus Larry Flint, Natural Born Killers, the kind of courtroom lovers on the run meets criminals being criminally concept of this movie. The fact that it's a musical but a non-musical, there's a lot of subversion, willful subversion in the movie, and I always respond myself to subversion in terms of, oh, that's something I haven't seen before, and oh, that's a different way to take it. And ultimately, I think what I like about it is the idea that they definitely delve into, which is this comparison and contrast between the Joker and the unseen Batman character who is not in this movie, and they don't talk about him because he's a kid in the narrative of this movie, but still it's approaching Joker as a character, his own character, from the perspective that you would see a Batman movie about. And I think that's refreshing in the way that we've gotten down the road in comic book films and not just comic book characters so far, that now we can have these experiments happen. And I find that more interesting than a Deadpool and Wolverine, which is just, hey, here's your slop, folks. This is exactly what you wanted to see, and you're going to get it. This is
Okay.
this is this is antagonistic for sure as a movie in terms of like it's obviously appealing to no one, and it's not appeasing anyone. It's not pandering. It's just kind of a middle finger to the fans as well as the detractors. But in that way, it's it's something to talk about.
Yeah, that's an approach, certainly. So I'm going to link to your review in the show notes so people can get a deeper dive by clicking on that. I'm sure Ryan and I will talk about the box office aspect of it next week. But anyway, I just wanted to sort of start the show by talking about what we're not going to talk about. So let's switch gears and talk about the movie that we're really here to discuss today, which is It's What's Inside, which is a new film that is streaming on Netflix right now. Bill, you had a chance to see this at Sundance, where it premiered earlier this year. Ryan, I think you also saw it at a film festival screening several months ago now. I watched a screener of it in late August, so it's actually been a little while since any of us have seen this thing, I think. But I'll just say that I loved this movie. On my Letterboxd, I wrote, every once in a while, I will think that all of the good stories have been told, and then something like this comes along to prove me wrong. So, Ryan, without getting into spoilers yet, what was your reaction to It's What's Inside?
So I saw this at South by Southwest earlier this year, and all I had heard up to that point is that it sold for a very large amount of money at Sundance, and that like the synopsis was, like stuff happens at a pre-wedding party, and it kind of involved a suitcase. Like they were being very cagey about it, and for good reason. So I went into it almost entirely blind, and I don't know how you can like movies, particularly genre movies, and watch this and not kind of come out. And maybe even if you don't love the movie, love that it exists, if that makes sense. Like it just it does that thing that you said where it's like, oh yeah, oh my god, original things can happen, and they don't have to be, bombastic or whatever. Like you can do these like high concept but low budget execution. I don't know. It just left me feeling so many good things. It might not make my personal favorites of the year, but I really loved it for a lot of reasons.
Okay. What do you think about it, Bill?
So I'm lucky enough to see it twice. I did just recently see it again this past Tuesday, as of this time of recording, at the Beyond Fest premiere in the Egyptian in Los Angeles.
Oh,
And
cool. Okay.
yeah, the cast and crew were in attendance. It was a big to do. It was great. And so I've been lucky to see it twice in the theater, both the Sundance premiere and this. And each time there is this infectious energy that comes off of this movie, not just in the style that Greg Jardin is establishing for himself. This is only his first feature, so we don't get yet to say that something is Jardinistic yet, but I think that we might, very soon, if he keeps making features, hopefully, because he has such a unique kineticism to his work. And even if, like Ryan was just saying, even if you're not somebody who vibes with what ends up being the concept of the movie, what ends up being the twists and turns, what ends up being, what it explores and how it explores it, I think you do have to appreciate how aggressively open-hearted and fun that it approaches this material with, because it's something that, if you're watching it with a crowd, even if you yourself might not be vibing with it, you can feel other people vibing with it. You can feel people try to figure out what's going to happen next, what's going on, what sort of thing we are actually even watching. And the fun of that is something that is really infectious and really, I hope, takes this thing into the pop culture in a big way.
Yeah. So I want to talk to you about the theatrical experience of it all in a few minutes when we get into the spoilers. But I asked you guys before we started recording to watch Cowboy Bebop: The Lost Session, which is a promo that Greg wrote, directed, and edited before making It's What's Inside. It's this 3-minute thing for Netflix's live action Cowboy Bebop show that starred John Cho that came out a couple of years ago. As far as I can tell, Greg did not actually work on the show itself. He only worked on this promo. And I've not seen a second of the real show or the anime on which it's based. But this short, this trailer, this promo, whatever you want to call it, this thing has such an amazing sense of style to it that it's not hard to see how this director could end up making a movie as creative as It's What's Inside. So, Ryan, what did you think about this short? You said you'd seen it before, right?
I watched it for some reason when that promo dropped, even though I didn't watch Cowboy Bebop. I'm not an anime guy. I watched the promo, and I remember thinking like, that's really cool. And then all of the, like the reaction of the show was what it was, so I didn't get around to it. But I just watching that now again after having seen this movie, I can't help but think like, man, he probably spent less on that movie than Netflix did on this promo. And like, but I also imagine that like that promo might have helped, encourage Netflix on the sale after this movie or whatever, you know what I mean? Cause like they had worked with him a little bit, and he did a lot with a little, it's a promo,
Yeah,
it
it
couldn't have been
definitely seems like some of the same creative flourishes appear, especially the use of split screen, which
yeah, there's this kinetic energy to it, which he
mhm.
sort of, which I like Bill said, it's a little early on to say if this, that, you can't say that something's like, how would you say it? Jardanian, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Jardinesque, Jardanian, yeah.
but it feels like there is something there, right? Like it feels like there's there's even just taking like the fact that you could watch a promo for a TV show and say, oh yeah, that like you can see the filmmaker in a promo. That's pretty
Mhm.
cool. I
Yeah,
think that
yeah.
that's like an exceptionally rare thing. So, I mean, to me, if nothing else, it shows, it further demonstrates the guy's chops.
Yeah, I'm going to link to it in the show notes so people can check it out. I encourage you to do so. Once again, even if you've never seen or even heard of Cowboy Bebop, just the style on display here is really cool.
The only thing for people that maybe didn't vibe with the show as much, the only thing, a shameless plug here, pal of mine named Lamar Mathurin actually illustrated the official comic book tie-in series that ran for 4 issues that was published by Titan Comics. And the vibe I got from people was that comic was closer in line to what they had hoped from the show. So if you want to seek some Cowboy Bebop stuff out, check that out.
Excellent. Okay, so
And
Bill, what did you think about this?
I was going to say I unfortunately did not see the show. Well, not unfortunately, because I heard it was not worth watching. But I did get to see. I have a friend who's a big anime fan. He made me sit down and watch Cowboy Bebop, the movie, the anime movie, and just watching this short brought me right back to that movie. And I was like, well, this looks like exactly what it's supposed to be doing on the tin, of like a live action adaptation of the spirit of the series, or the anime series, in terms of how visual and kinetic and stylistic it is. So, like you, Ben, I've not seen a single second of the show proper, the live action show, but judging from everything that people have said about it and what I've read about it, it seems like that style did not make it into the actual show, which, what a shame, first of all. And why, if you had, I wonder when they hired Jardin to make this promo, was it post the making of the show or pre? Because if it was pre and you didn't hire Jardin to at least direct an episode, what are you doing, guys? Come on.
Yeah, I wonder if like it could be, maybe it was like too difficult to sustain that level of energy over the course of an entire runtime of an episode or something. I don't know. It reminded me a little bit of Edgar Wright, just in
Sure.
terms of the style. So if that's attractive to anybody out there and you've not checked this out yet, maybe jump over and watch the short and then come back and finish listening to us. But okay, so I'm trying to think. I think that's pretty much all we can say really about It's What's Inside before we get into what the movie is really about and sort of like the big, it's not even a twist, it's the premise of the movie. But
it is
to honor the director's wishes, I'll try not to spoil it really, even though the trailer I think gives away
it does. Can I say something here? When I was at the Beyond Fest premiere just the other night, so the way Beyond Fest works is that during they have a sort of a pre-show, which really is just a reel of trailers of all the movies that they're going to be showing at the fest. And they usually keep the volume, not too loud, but they definitely have it audible. And so I've been going to a bunch of different screenings there, and so I'm kind of used to what the reel sounds like at this point. And most intriguingly, when I was at the It's What's Inside screening, the only trailer during that reel playing during the pre-show that was completely muted was the trailer for It's What's Inside. So I don't know if that was Netflix or Jardin himself saying, hey, for this screening only, can we maybe turn off the sound? Because I don't want people to know going in if they don't already know. That's my conspiracy theory, but like, given how passionate he was at Sundance about talking to us, because most people who were at the Sundance premiere were press or media, and he was very passionate about pleading to them, like, look, I know you're going to write about the movie, I know you're going to explain kind of what it is, I know you want to, maybe if you like it, you want to drum up excitement, or if you don't, you want to, talk, shit about it, but please try not to reveal the premise, because part of the fun of the movie is watching it for the first time, mostly cold, and not knowing what kind of premise you're going into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I had that same experience, I should say, where I think I heard some of the buzz from your review, Bill, and some of the other folks who were talking about the movie from the festival circuit. And so I didn't know what the movie was really about before I went into it. And I highly recommend that viewing experience if that is available to you. So, okay, with all of that said, let's now put up a spoiler warning. So we're going to talk about the movie in detail now from this point on. So yeah, last chance to hit pause or whatever. Bill, you opened well, I guess we should maybe I'll just say what the premise of the movie is. So a group of friends get together for a friend's party right before he's supposed to get married. And a guy that they used to know, this is sort of like a group of friends who all went to college together, but they've kind of gone their separate ways in life. It's been a few years since they've seen each other, and they all get back together for this big sort of like drunken party night right before this big wedding. And one of the attendees of this party is a guy who was basically kicked out of the college that they attended because of this chaotic party that happened, and that is recreated in a really fun way in this movie. The whole thing with like the photos and the details changing and all of that. I love that aesthetic. That was really cool. And then this guy has gone on to work in the tech sector in some mysterious fashion, and he brings a suitcase to this party and reveals that that he wants to play a game with these people, basically. And the thing that's revealed a few minutes into this film is that what the suitcase does is it allows everybody to essentially plug in and switch bodies with each other. So that opens up a whole host of interesting dynamics between these people who have long simmering tensions between them, and different romantic entanglements and interests and all that. And there's like an aspect of people being able to maybe live out fantasies of engaging with other people that they never would be able to in their normal body, that they are able to in somebody else's body. So there's all this stuff sort of boiling around in this movie. Bill, I wanted to ask you, like, you opened your written review of this film by talking about identity and the ways that we all craft different personas or versions of ourselves for different audiences. And I was wondering if you thought that this movie had anything really meaningful to say about that idea, or is the body switching thing just kind of a fun setup for a story like this?
Why not both? It's something that I think this is what I would dub a party movie, where it's like you want a crowd or you want at least some friends to watch it with, just to have the fun of the kineticism that Jardin brings to it. Not that it can't work, solo. Of course, a good movie can, but it's just it becomes exponentially raised with you have more people with it. We'll get to that later, but I do think that aside, there is so much on this movie's mind in the way that it mixes and matches the characters and their relationships and the way that they interact with each other and what they're after. Whereas something like Bodies, Bodies, Bodies was trying to be more of a commentary on the times and the generation, there's certainly a lot to see in this movie, and it's what's inside about Gen Z, which I think that's generally the age of all these characters in the movie. They're about late 20s, or early 30s, but there's still a resonance to all of the topics that Jardin brings up with the script that can apply to pretty much anyone. And even though we're dealing with very topical ideas like social media influencers and whatnot, it's approaching the idea of body swapping, because most body swapping movies, if you're talking about a Freaky Friday or a vice versa, Switch, Blake Edwards, they're usually like a bit of Prince and the Pauper, where it's like class distinction of like you're poor, you're rich, you're you're young, you're old, you're whatever, that sort of thing. This idea of like opposites, or there's a grass is always greener aspect to all body swapping stories, but like those really emphasize the distinction between different ends of the spectrum. Here, with the exception of maybe one or two people, like most people are on the same playing field. So it's less about, oh, I want to feel like what it's like to be rich or attractive, or all of them are pretty much attractive. There's not like any sort of an aspect to that. So it's this idea more about what your own personal identity is in a world where identity is increasingly fabricated and bifurcated or shattered. It's this idea of like we all have so many different personas that we present to each other in different ways through different apps. And so it's a really on the nose but kind of really fun way to exploit that.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Ryan, I know it's been a little while since you've seen this, but do you have any moments from this movie, now that we're in full spoiler territory, that stood out to you, that you remember all these months later, that you're really excited or interested by?
Yeah, there's a couple things. For one, I think what's interesting, despite the sci-fi high concept nature of it, it's one of those things where with the identity, with all the dynamics going around, with all these different characters having sort of interplay, whatever, there's stuff that like I would imagine for other people too, like depending on your life, your situation, what like stuff will hit close to home. It will feel close, and you might even be like, oh no, you might have like, oh god, that feels like. And for me, I had some personal stuff going on in my life at the time that when I saw it, I had these like, it just felt real to me. Like there were parts of it where like it just felt so close to stuff that I had been through, where it just like really resonated. So and that happens early on in the film. So for me, then I think it opens that door for connection, right? Like then you connect more, even if it is uncomfortable, you connect more deeply with it. And so that's kind of what happened to me. But then the one thing I will say is that I love I'd probably say like sci-fi is my favorite genre, like pressed gun to my head. Like that's probably, where like I love the most stuff. And yeah, that can take the form of like Jurassic Park or Star Wars, where it's big budget and it's this and that. But I'm always fascinated by and really love when you can take like a really great concept and execute without like a ton of money. And this is like and it's not like the audience feels that, right? It's not like the audience is going, "Oh, this is low budget." Like they're just watching something wildly entertaining. And this
Mhm.
is really the only thing in this movie for the most part that is not people talking in a room is that briefcase with like leads attached to it. And it's just like it's nothing. It's a little thing you could make probably with junk, and then you're able to just it's pure storytelling, it's pure ideas, it's pure imagination, it's pure execution. And I just love that. I love that so much. It's such a like reminder that, don't get me wrong, I love great special effects. I love car chase and stuff blowing up and all this, but it doesn't have to be that. And you can still, so often it's easy to lean on that stuff, but the story and the character is always the most important thing.
Mhm.
And this is like even for a guy who loves spectacle, this is such a reminder of that, where like the way the story unfolds and the way the concept unfolds almost is a form of spectacle, if that makes any sense. And I
Yeah.
really think that, like, because I'm all about, I've said this many times on the podcast, if movies exist on a graph and one axis is art and one axis is entertainment, I make no bones about the fact that I value that entertainment axis more. But ideally, you should have a healthy intersection on that graph, and I think this movie is like arguably kind of the perfect intersection.
So both of you had the experience of seeing this in theaters, which is unlike 99% of the people who will ever watch it because of the Netflix of it all. I do think that this movie could have made a decent amount of money and become like a cool word of mouth hit in theaters, but I'm torn because I watched this with my wife at home and I appreciated the ability to be on the couch and pause it and be like, okay, just so I'm clear, this person is now in this person's body and this person is in this person's body, right? And sort of like talk through a couple of the motivations before resuming the movie. And I think you could probably apply that line of thinking to a lot of different movies. But I personally felt particularly appreciative for this one because as the movie ramps up to its ending, it's designed to leave you unclear for a little while about who is who. So, just for you guys who saw it in theaters and had that unusual experience, do you wish you had that ability during your first viewing to pause it and kind of like settle in your mind who's who and all that? Or did you kind of cherish your lack of control in the theatrical setting and like let the thing just wash over you and let the chips fall where they may? I guess, Ryan, let's start with you.
No, not at all. I don't. I think part of it, even one of the things I did during like the pandemic lockdown, is I missed the theatrical experience so much. And one of the things I would do every once in a while is I would literally turn my phone off. I would shut all the lights off, and I would get the remote far enough away from me where I would be almost force myself to sit down and watch a movie in the way that I would like watch it in a theater, right? And so I try to, and I try not to like lean too much on that, especially for a first time watch. And for me, I think with this movie specifically, it's sort of about embracing the chaos of it. And I feel like the pacing is very intentional, and the way that it is sort of meant to be a little like, you're supposed to feel confused, like everyone in that house feels confused.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
don't think it works if you're sitting there trying to like Charlie Kelly stringboard the whole thing together. Like, it's not. I don't think it's the same. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that experience. I'm sure people are going to do that. I'm sure people are going to pause it and go, wait, what's going on? And that's fine. For me, that was not at all the experience I wanted to have. I really settled into it and allowed myself to just kind of go with it, because I'm not going to pretend like I wasn't a little like I like there was maybe some things that were like, benefiting from a second viewing to sort of put some pieces together or whatever. But it's not like if you don't have every bit of it straight when you walk out, that takes anything away from the experience, because it's kind of
Right. Right.
supposed
Right.
to be a bit chaotic and confusing and whatever. Like, so I like that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we were kind of in that party mode that Bill was talking about earlier, where we were like jacked up watching this movie. Like, oh my god, I can't believe we're watching this. I can't believe this premise exists really in this way, and that it's being executed to this level. And so we were like excitedly kind of like trying to track this stuff. And I think I want to say we only paused it once at the end, like where it's really, really designed to be like where things go crazy and like the characters don't know what's going on. And I think it was just kind of like a fun thing for us to be like, all right, wait, let's see if we can figure this out before the movie reveals it to us. But so yeah, I don't want to like paint the picture that we were like keeping a Charlie Kelly board for the entire film or anything. But
you weren't taking it down on a notepad, yeah.
Yeah, but Bill, what about you in terms of that whole question?
Well, I see the points both of you make because I've been where both of you are, and I used to be a person, especially because I'm such a physical media advocate, and there's been so many first time watches that I've had on disc. I took advantage of that quite often, and what I would do is I would be watching something for the very first time, and if a line of dialogue would occur where I wasn't sure what they said, I would rewind it right away. I would, some cases I would go back entire scenes and be like, oh wait, I don't remember what happened, 15 minutes ago. Oh right, yeah, okay, and do that. And for a while that was fun in terms of like, wow, I really had a first watch that was so fulfilling because I got every single point of what was supposed to happen and blah blah blah. But ultimately, once I started getting into the films of Robert Altman, especially, and then, Christopher Nolan, of course, was always making new stuff while this was happening for me. So I would get the Altman-esque tones of Nolan's dialogue in there too. I really began to give myself over to the thought of like, okay, actually, I like being a little out of control. I like feeling a little confused in whatever it may be, and having the feeling of like, okay, if this is a filmmaker worth their salt, then I can trust them and they'll take me to where I need to go, even though I won't be able to give a detailed explanation of XYZ, but
Mm-hmm.
I'll at least, understand on a visceral level where I am. And so in the last, I'd say, 15 years, that's where I've kind of come to. And every so often I'll go back to, let me just pause, let me check, let me do that if it's something I really want to catch. But ultimately, I try and give myself over, like Ryan was saying, to the theatrical experience, even at home. And I think what's been so delicious about watching this movie with an audience is, obviously it'll probably never happen again just because of the way that word of mouth works. But that first Sundance viewing was so special in that crowd because literally, and also you have to remember when this was being moved around and shopped around for, distributors to buy, there was this idea that, oh, it's a new horror film. And I think, as we kind of already stated during this podcast, it's not quite a horror film. It's really more a science fiction film. It is a thriller, but, with the exception of one jump scare and maybe one or two other moments, it's not attempting to disturb or, scare you or get under your skin in that way. It's
I would. Oh, sorry, Bill. Go ahead. I'm so sorry.
oh, okay.
I would like to revisit that element of the
Okay.
conversation.
But what I'm saying is it did give people an expectation at that first screening of, oh, we're about to see a slasher film, because it's a bunch of people in one location, things are going to get crazy. People are probably going to get stabbed, and nobody gets stabbed in this movie. People do die, but in a very funny sort of, escalating circumstance way. What I've been using to describe to people without giving spoilers away, to try and preserve that experience for people that haven't seen it, I've been describing it as, and it's funny you were talking about, low budget, Ryan. I've been saying, okay, imagine Michael Bay was given $10 and only $10, and he had to make an episode of The Twilight Zone, and it's like that. Just because the way Bayhem works in most of Bay's movies is like you are so inundated with images and ideas and concepts and lines and tones that you just can't handle it. And most people, run away from that because, yeah, it's aggressive and it's obnoxious at times. But I do like how it forces you to be on your toes, and the feeling that Jardin brings to this movie in a theatrical setting is, hey, you're going to be confused, like you were saying, Ryan, but it's that idea of like it's one wild night, because it's not quite a real time movie, but it might as well be in the sense that it is over the course of one night primarily. And it's
Mm-hmm.
this idea that you're deep in it, you're just as, confused as these people are trying to play the game. And it makes a game out of the movie for you too, in a way that a whodunit will invite, like, who's the slasher, who's the killer. This is who's who, so that's kind of fun.
Yeah. Okay, so Ryan, what do you think about? You made a comment there. You wanted to revisit something.
Yeah, so look, I think that there's this thing sometimes where people they say horror, right? And your expectation is jump scares and blood and, whatever. There's people, different things scare different people, whatever. I've never sort of loved the idea that horror is defined by how much it scares the shit out of you or how much, like you lose sleep over it. I think with this movie, yes, it's funny. Yes, it's sci-fi. Some of the best horror of all time is also blended with sci-fi, Alien, The Thing, whatever. But I think with this, okay, you get swapped into someone else's body and you can't go back. You want to tell me that's not horrifying? So I do
Oh
think
yeah,
that the inherent no, and Bill, I know what you were saying, but I just did want to sort of like,
right.
for my money, it is still very much like, more psychological. And I know body horror comes with a specific expectation, but it's body horror of a sort, because you are literally not in your body anymore. There's stuff there that, so I don't know. I do like that it's able to kind of walk that line between those things. And that also serves to further subvert the expectations of this thing, which I like.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
way different than something like The Substance, which is, extreme body horror and like gore and all that kind of craziness. But there is this like pit of your stomach, this drop that you feel of like, oh my God, these characters are never going to be able to return to their own bodies again. That happens at the end of this movie that is just like a gut punch. It's just devastating. You're
Yeah.
just like, oh my God, this game has spun so far out of control here.
And let me just try and get my credibility back. I mean, I think the Goosebumps movies are horror. It's like, and those are clearly not meant to be too scary. But like, yes, obviously,
Bill, let
anything
me
with
be
horror
clear. I was
elements.
not trying to strip you of any credibility. I
No,
just wanted
no.
to like.
Hey, I had to try and defend Joker too. All right, I got to get my credibility back. So it's this idea that like, yes, I think I agree with all of what you're saying. It's I just don't know. And Ryan, maybe you could speak to this too because you talk about this a lot in your work. I don't know if, let's say this hadn't gone to Netflix, let's say, A24 or Neon had bought it. I personally, I think A24 was the next best choice just because I could see this, like Ben, you said at the top of this, if they had gotten it and put it into a theatrical release, it could have been another Talk to Me or Bodies, Bodies, Bodies for them, but I do wonder what the marketing campaign would be about if Jardin was like, let's not give away the premise. Would they have just not abided by that at all? Or would they have tried to lean on the mystery or the spookiness of like, oh, maybe this is a spooky movie that you don't know what's inside, sort of idea? I'm not actually sure. I don't know what that would have looked like.
Yeah, what do you think about that, Ryan?
It's tough. I mean, because there's been times where I've like reviewed movies and I'm just like, don't know anything about it. Like I remember when Barbarian was coming out, I was like, I mean, luckily they were able to market that. Like that movie had materials that you could market without giving things away. But like it is hard to talk because you market it as more of a straightforward horror movie before realizing what it is.
Mm.
But like this movie, yeah, it's one of those rare situations. I wish more people could see it in the theater, but it is one of those rare situations where Netflix has the ability that a lot of companies don't, where you can just put it out there and let the word of mouth kind of carry it. And that is kind of ideal for this movie. I would not envy the person who had to figure out how to market this movie without spoiling it. Because I do think that would take a lot away, right? So I don't
Yeah,
know.
I was
That is
thinking
tricky.
about what Neon did with Long Legs and like how they did such an incredible job marketing that movie and
No,
really,
totally. But there's a reason that so many people, even like marketing folks, have looked at that movie and been like, "This is a miracle." Like
yeah.
this is because like it truly was one of those, like, people will talk about that marketing campaign. Like I guarantee you, any upcoming horror movie right now, everyone and their mother and sitting in these meetings, we got to do the long legs thing, and everyone's rolling their eyes. Like
Mm.
it's not that easy. And
Yeah.
so, like, I'm no marketing expert, but I know I can sort of trace data sometimes and look at what works, what doesn't, whatever. And like this one would have been, it's hard for me to imagine, like how you would have, done a full, TV spots and billboards, and you would, I guess, to Bill's point, you might have had to lean into the mystery, but as it exists, it does kind of get the benefit of just being able to go to the Netflix and people get to see it, and that might be the best case scenario for something like this.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's pretty much all we have time for before we throw to the interview that I did with Greg Jardin. I just wanted to say shout out to the cast of this movie. I'm not going to be able to go through all of them because it's a big ensemble thing, but Brittany O'Grady, James Morosini, David Thompson, Alicia Debnam, Carey, yeah, shout out to them. I thought everybody did a really great job. And it was a nice group of folks, some of which I'd seen before and some of whom I had never seen in anything. So I always appreciate that in an ensemble, being able to like put people on my radar and track people's careers and stuff going forward. So shout out to everybody involved with this movie. Great stuff all around. Any final thoughts before we wrap things up here, guys? Ryan, any last It's What's Inside thoughts from you?
No, other than the only thing, and I think all of us would firmly agree here, cannot wait to see what Greg Jardin does next. Like
Yeah.
whatever, what like it's one of those things. Whatever it is, like I do not like musicals. If you're like Greg Jardin's doing, I'm gonna watch it. Whatever it is, he has my money for the next thing. Like what, and I imagine we're all in that same boat. So, and that's not always the case. With like you might be like, I like that. We'll see. I'm in the bag for whatever this dude does next.
What about you, Bill? Closing thoughts?
Closing thoughts is just the fact that I'm very, very sad for myself that I probably likely won't get to own a physical copy of this movie. I would love to watch it over and over again. It really holds up upon a second watch, and I think it probably would for further watches. But just the ability to, I would love to hear a Greg Jardin commentary track about it. Just like it would be so cool to see how to really break down, because the cast at the Q&A for the Beyond Fest screening did say that while they were making the movie, as actors do, they broke down the script. They really asked each other and Greg, like, how does this work? How does this work? How does this work? And they couldn't find any holes themselves. So I think this is really one of the most impressive scripts that I've seen in a little bit. And I echo what Ryan said. I can't wait to see what Greg does next.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's going to do it for this segment of the show. We're going to take a break and then we'll come back and I'll present my interview with Greg Jardin. Greg, thank you for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it. And congrats
Hey,
on the
man.
movie. It's incredible. I really, really loved it. It's What's Inside is your feature directorial debut. Before we talk about that, though, I want to ask about Cowboy Bebop: The Lost Session. I was
Oh, yeah.
clicking through your IMDb and I stumbled upon this and was blown away by the creativity and the energy of this thing. And it uses split screen in this way that I've never seen before. Split screen is a big part of It's What's Inside. So, what was your experience like of making that short, and how did what you learned on that inform your movie?
Yeah. Oh, thanks for asking about that. That was an amazing experience. Like I basically like got flown to New Zealand because of COVID. I ended up being there for 2 months. And it was amazing. And there was no COVID in New Zealand. So it was like it was right as it was pre-vaccine. So it was still in the terror zone. And yeah, I got to work with Andre Nemec, the showrunner. He really just treated me like a director on the show, and he was supportive of the promo. And it's funny, he came to one of our test screenings of It's What's Inside, and he's like, "Now I see why you did all that split screen stuff on." But yeah, I mean, I think it was just like that. It was an ambitious project, and we had to cram a lot of stuff into a short period of time, which was certainly that idea certainly carried over to It's What's Inside, because we only had 18 days to shoot. Everything had to sort of be like pre-planned. So yeah, uh yeah, I mean, it was, gosh, yeah, I love that experience. I love Auckland. I love that crew. I'm so friends with Daniela. Like it was yeah, it was wonderful.
I normally avoid the question, where did you get your idea for this? Because ideas are so ephemeral and it's like almost impossible to describe what inspired something sometimes. But this movie has such a unique premise that I kind of have to ask it anyway. So do you remember how this idea came about?
Yeah, I mean, it initially came from like I'd been trying unsuccessfully to make a movie for like 10 years, and I was essentially just looking for a lot of money to make like another type of sci-fi comedy. And in 2016, I was like, man, I just got to write like a one location. I can make it for as little money as possible. So the initial idea was just birthed from it should just be one house, one night. A guy shows up with a suitcase, and something in the suitcase is sci-fi. I don't exactly remember where that suitcase idea came from, but it was just sort of like the like basic, um, initial premise, mandate, whatever. And then I played the game Mafia at my friend's birthday party, and so that had this sort of like party game thing very fresh in my mind. But I really ideated on like what could the sort of game that comes out of the suitcase be for like a solid 6 months. I came up with the body swapping thing. I thought it was okay. But I didn't really fall in love with it until I came up with the idea that two people could die, and then like everyone would essentially be fucked. And I was like, oh, that would be crazy. So yeah, that's kind of where it came from, sort of.
Yeah, I imagine it's not the easiest thing to visually translate who is occupying whose body at any given time. And I loved what you ended up doing with the RGB color scheme thing. Did
Oh,
you ever
thanks.
consider any other way to visualize that, or was that always baked in from the start?
That was in yeah, that was in from the start. I mean, like I didn't necessarily know what like I didn't decide on what scenes to do that with until we were like there in Portland about to shoot. But that wasn't written into the script until like very, very late. But like that idea had been there from like before I had actually written page one of the script just because I was familiar with like red, green, blue channels. I knew about RGB art because this guy Karnofsky does these murals, and I thought that was a cool way to. I like the metaphor of if you just look at the red channel of any image like in Photoshop, you could theoretically see something hidden inside of it. So I thought that was a cool metaphor, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. You also use several very deep, really rich colors for just the ambient lighting in a lot of the scenes. And I was wondering if you had conversations with your team, your collaborators, about what each color was supposed to represent in any given moment.
Man, people have asked that. I mean, the sad answer is not really. I mean, we certainly talked about like the colors and the lighting. Basically the kind of rule we came up with was there should be no red light used in the movie, and like just like in the world of the movies, so that when the movie does turn on the red light, that feels different. But everything else, like the idea of like greens and blues. We talked to my cinematographer Fletch and our production designer Terry about working those into the house as much as possible. So like, the the dining room has red walls, the foyer has blue walls, and then the main living room with the game has green walls, and then Fletch lit everything with these colorful lights. But that really came out of taking a lot of inspiration from like Suspiria and Giallo movies, and just like I just love expressionistic lighting and how you can use lights to just create a mood, and it's not necessarily like realistic, but it just puts you in a sort of headspace when you're watching a film. So I really wanted to like embrace that.
Yeah. Was it a stressful shoot with only 18 days to do? I mean, you've got like a lot of different moving parts. It's a kind of a complicated premise. You've got a lot of actors at play and not very much time. So what was the vibe like on the actual set?
Well, so I mean, I'm an anxious guy, so every shoot for me is stressful. But because everyone always says like, man, this idea is ambitious. I don't know if we're gonna get. I don't know. So like, I essentially have to make a plan with my team and execute it, and inherently stuff goes wrong. You start to get stressed out. But I mean, I guess my general philosophy as a director is I try to present a calm aura, and I never, especially with the cast, I never tried to like I never let them know if anything was going wrong, just because I wanted them to stay in like a creative headspace and not worry about whatever, hey, that light just broke, or but I mean, they had a great vibe, and we had a week of rehearsal prior to the shoot, and so that really, really helped. They bonded, we bonded, we did a lot of character lifting there, and so by the time it was, and we rehearsed a lot of scenes. So by the time we were shooting, it wasn't like we had to figure a lot of stuff out. We were essentially just doing it, but we were certainly uh, always on the clock.
Well, you mentioned things going wrong, and things go wrong on every film shoot. I was wondering if there was one big one that sticks out in your mind looking back on that experience of like either some big thing going wrong that you guys eventually figured out how to overcome, or yeah, just some sort of experience like that that sticks with you now.
Someone asked me that. I couldn't come up with anything. I mean, it's like it's honestly just like a lot of little I mean, I can talk about stuff going wrong like before we got to Portland, just in terms of like, trying to get it going, and then it fell apart, and trying to get it going and it fell apart. We're going out to actors, they passed, like that kind of thing. But when we were shooting, all the stuff that went wrong, like this prop wasn't working, the machine all of a sudden stopped working, this one light just decided to stop working, it's raining outside now, and we didn't think it was going to rain today, like that kind of thing. But there is no not I mean, thank God there's no massive disaster, because yeah, if there was, like, I don't know how we would have finished it.
Well, what about like approaching a scene? Because I'd love to talk to filmmakers about like when they are on set and they get ready to shoot something, and for some reason, something about the scene just isn't really working, and
Oh
having
yeah.
to sort of come up with something on the fly to fix that problem, like in real time with the pressure on and all of that. What about sort of in
Yeah.
that mode? Is there anything you can think of there?
Yes, I can speak to a few things. Yeah, I mean, like a big thing I learned on this was how like because this is my first time really working with actors like on this level, like in the the promo you saw, it's like in in that case, I meet John, Danielle, and Mustafa sort of like day before. How's it going? Here's what we're doing. Like we're not going deep into anything. So I really learned a lot by working with the actors. One big thing I learned is how like a good actor can carry subtext and just work wonders with it. There's a scene where it's like Alicia and Devin are like sitting in the basement. He's like tied to a pole, and they essentially have this conversation, which mostly takes place in split screen. That initial scene was like 3 pages, and it essentially had all these character beats in it, and it explained a bunch of stuff. And like that morning, Devin and Alicia both came to me. They're like, "Hey, man, kind of feel like this scene is overwritten and it's too long." And like, it's one of those things where like, oh man. And it's like I only have 5 minutes to have this conversation. So what do we but basically like talking to them, they're like, I think we can just whittle it all down. And I remember Alicia specifically saying, and we can do a lot with subtext. So we cut the scene down to like 6 lines. And I was amazed at just watching them rehearse it, how much they communicated just by the way they said stuff. And yeah, I'll never forget that lesson. So yeah, that was special to me that I had that experience, and just how you, you can do more with less, I guess is the
Yeah, I mean, that's a big deal for a first-time featured director to take that note essentially from his actors and be like, "All right, I trust you guys. Let's do this thing." Like I feel like a lot of people would have been like, "Okay, that's interesting. We're going to shoot the whole thing anyway, and I'll figure it out in post." But for you to actually take that note on the fly, that's an interesting thing there.
like I honestly like during the whole shoot, but during the rehearsal week, they all came with so many like thoughtful ideas and questions, and like I just trusted them so much, and just seeing how much they thought about stuff. I never had an actor think about something I wrote with that level of scrutiny. So I just trusted them, and I try to approach directing like, you want to surround yourself like I need a cast who can act better than I can, which is not hard, but like, it's like I need a DP who's a better DP than me, and like therefore like I need to listen to him. So yeah, it's just I think as a director, it's just about listening to all the ideas from your collaborators, and just trying to have no ego, and be like, yes, this is a better idea that serves this version. It's irrelevant if I came up with something different a year ago.
Yeah. One of my favorite parts of the movie is the scenes where you have like the voiceovers basically narrating photos that explain the
Yeah.
backstory of certain characters, where these details of these still photos are changing with people's memories as they correct each other or recount different aspects of the story. Can you talk about your approach to those moments? Because I love that.
Yeah, in the script, I believe I referred to that as Photoshop on crack. Like you're watching someone's Photoshop screen and they're just turning layers on and off kind of fast. That was really just like, I essentially knew we needed this backstory, which was essentially just going to be an exposition dump prior to the main plot really getting going. And as a film fan, now a writer, like when I see exposition in a movie where it feels like the whole movie stops, like you can kind of feel the writing. So I was like, how can I make this sequence in and of itself be so kind of fun and engaging that you almost don't realize that you're just getting like just like exposition. So I don't exactly remember where the specific photo, like still photos idea came from, but I was certainly inspired by like black and white wedding photography with a flash. Like I just love the way that looks. But anyway, yeah. So it essentially came from that idea of just trying to hide the fact that you're just giving me exposition.
So you were not only the writer and director, but you also edited this movie. And I'm always curious about directors who edit their own work because a project can transform a lot as it goes through the different stages of movie making. So what did you learn about this movie in post that you didn't know about it when you were writing or shooting it?
Man, that's a great question. I mean, first thing that comes to mind is just like like I spent a lot of time finessing that like the like first 10 minutes, the opening, specifically everything like before they get to the house. There was initially a bunch more like we cut essentially three scenes out. Um and on the script, you feel like you need the scenes. They make everything make sense. They give exposition. They set up character beats. And then in the edit, you're like, it just feels like it's dragging, and I don't know why. Like the individual scenes, like are okay, but just like and like, but I feel like we need it, and then just slowly showing it to people and hearing the feedback, and then just kind of like understanding how important the pace, especially of a beginning, is, and establishing tone and sort of hinting at the types of things you're going to see, like that opening of the particles and pulling out of the machine. That was not initially in there. That came out of the edit, like feeling too slow, and I was like, we got to shoot like a something that feels sci-fi and like dangerous and ominous. But yeah, really, just I think big lesson was just how important beginnings of movies are.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
That's crucial. Yeah. Well, I think I'm out of time with you, Greg, but thank you so much again for taking the time. And I really
Thank
appreciate it. I
you.
love the movie. So
Thanks, man. Thank you for saying that. And thanks for the great questions.
you got it. I look forward to seeing what you do next. Take care.
Thanks, man. Bye.
All right, that'll do it for today's episode of the show. You can find more about the stories that we mentioned at slashfilm.com and linked in the show notes. I'm going to link to Bill's reviews of both Joker 2 and It's What's Inside. Slash Film Daily is published every weekday, bringing you the most exciting news from the world of movies and TV, as well as deeper dives into the great features you can find on the site. You can subscribe to the show on Apple, Overcast, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Send your feedback, questions, comments, concerns, and mailbag topics to us at bpearson@slashfilm.com. Make sure to leave your name and general geographic location in case we mention your email on the air. Don't forget to take a minute to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. That really, really, really helps out a lot. Tell your friends about the show any way you can. Thanks so much for listening, and we will talk to you all next week.